20 past.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for having me in to present this project that I'm working on at the moment. I've been working with Dr. Colin Lewis, who's presenting, later today at 4:30, and more recently, Dr. William Taylor. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys on behalf of the team. The title of the work is Long Balls and Balls Deep, a critical reading of female coach learners' experiences of the UEFA A. The kind of photo just used at the backdrop there is what you might see on a typical, UEFA A license classroom session. Doesn't want to just go forward for me. Why is that?
You've stopped the screen sharing.
Yeah, it doesn't want to go. Didn't want to go to the next slide for me. So is it all right if I just do it like that for now? Is that okay?
Yeah, if that suits, yeah, whatever works best for you.
It's just not clicking over as perhaps as easily as I would have liked on the Mac. I made a gamble today and went with the Mac. It's not paying off.
No worries.
Okay. So this work was guided by two key aims, central aims to the paper. Firstly, we were interested in critically unearthing and looking at the power-knowledge dynamics through language and actions that were experienced by the female coach learners in the educational space. And secondly, we wanted to explore how these learners navigated their way through the complexity of the male-dominated coaching culture on these courses. And we did that by applying a Foucauldian kind of inspired approach using concepts of power, regimes of truth, and orthodoxy. And we did that to try to expose the power relations that are inherent within the delivery, the governance, and the interactions within the pedagogical practice. And today, in the allocated time slot, I really wanted to privilege as much of the data as I could. So what we've got here, Colin's work in 2018 called for more research to consult and listen to female coaches within a coach education space, so we can advance our understanding into the barriers that females are continuing to face on coach education courses. And this was a really important element for the research team because we really wanted to illuminate and provide space for our participants' voice to be heard. And in the working of this paper and the write-up at the moment, we're trying to allocate around 3,000 words to just the data. We wanted to make a critical contribution to advance female coach learners and also explore the practice of coaching and how that's been reproduced through workings of discourse, taken for granted practice, but unintended but nevertheless powerful consequences. And what we're really trying to do here is through this body of work, we're trying to examine the mechanisms, the language and structural practices that were occurring on the UEFA A, and we decided to take a broad post-structuralist inspired approach. On the screen here, you can see the inclusion criteria, interview protocol, and a little bit just on the role of the researcher. I myself, I think I was like the 24th or 25th female coach in the country to get my UEFA A license at 25. And we felt that as the lead author of the work, I had first-hand experiences of the UEFA A. And we argue as a research team in a strong position to engage with and conduct the interviews and the field data process. Our analysis process and collection analysis and write-up was recursive and iterative process, and necessitated working backward and forward between the data and the theory, and understanding and questioning of the data set itself. So as a result of that process, myself and the research team were making ethical decisions about which aspects of the data we should commit to the paper and thus give voice, and which sections we had to silence and needed to remain on the computer. So we fully acknowledge that, you know, we had the politics of voice, and it was very much at the forefront of our thinking throughout the management of the data and the data analysis process itself. And we were also mindful of the fact that these A license holders had given us, you know, a huge amount of time and the emotional labour that was involved as part of this interview process and their experiences. As a result of that, we selected 4 themes, which you guys can see on the screen at the moment. So we've got language and voice, a general sense where the participants were overpowered and silently silenced and didn't really know where they fitted in. Text and curriculum, how male coach educators were present in the environment, and some of the references. Some participants didn't really know where the lack of female content fitted for them in their coaching environments back at their club, and as a result of that really affected the motivation for wanting to be on the course. The taken for granted practices where females, you know, are told, you know, you've got to coach like a man if you want to pass this award. And lastly, orthodoxy and resistance. Just because of time, I'm going to focus primarily just on the overpowered nature of language and voice. So on this slide, we've got a couple of quotes from some of the participants, so you can read that as I go. But hopefully here, in sharing the interviewees' experiences, we can illuminate this subtle, corrosive and coercive power dynamics which are habitually hidden within language. Disconcertingly, as soon as you arrive on, you know, the course to the moment you achieve the award itself, female coach learners are silenced, isolated and excluded by language. Jodie highlights this aggressive line of questioning upon arrival. And furthermore, as you begin to enter that educational classroom space, these female coach learners are overpowered and suppressed by dialogue. Really hard to get into those male conversations, as Alice and Joe explain there on the slide. So we got a general sense that you know, female coach learners did attempt to navigate this space in the classrooms in their own way. They had to fight and challenge this all-male, overpowering voice within the classroom. Although the classroom was difficult to navigate, what's more alarming is what females were subjected to in the downtime when we're thinking about language and voice. So the participants identified the male voice in the downtime was the most difficult. They were isolated, they felt awkward in the interaction, and, you know, the first quote there by Liv forms in part, you know, our title on the first slide. Here, male conduct shapes social practice and illuminates those concealed truths. On the slide here, we've got examples from Liv, Kim and Alice, just on, you know, the types of language that we used in the downtime. These examples do shine a light, you know, for me personally, when I'm thinking about it. Well, you're damned if you do go down to the bar and try to interact and try to navigate. But furthermore, you're kind of damned if you don't, because you become further isolated and detached from the course itself. Here we draw attention to the regimes of truth within the apparatus of the organisation and language, where female learners must decide to confront or themselves become a co-conspirator to this orthodoxy. Furthermore, I just wanted to shine a little bit of a light on how coach educators themselves are trusted to govern the conduct within this space, and at times legitimize an unequal and disempowering experience for female coach learners. So in this example here, you know, Liv's involved, and the first one on a conference call. and the other people buzzing on don't know that she's there. As soon as they become aware of that, the language that is used in that space, changes. Liv was acutely aware that she was, a buzzkill in this environment, a buzzkill in the Orthodox boys' club, a club where only men are welcome, and moreover found it difficult to further fit into this discourse and space. So too often, coach educators were co-conspirators and enabled this practice to continue. In this kind of extract here from Ria, it's a really nice example of how language is used on the course to include or exclude female learners from conversations in that boys' club, whether that be in the classroom. This example itself was on the side of the pitch, where a 11v11 practice is being conducted by, a peer on the course. And this symbolic language and violence began to align itself with the dominant group, which, in this case is men. And as a result, females are often othered and silently silenced. So we've got a lot of different examples of how voice and language kind of exists in this space. And what one of the participants, Liv, said to me was, I don't think language, I don't think gender is, the real issue here. It's not females in the space. It's getting the language right that everyone can understand. That's the important part. Getting female content onto the course is essential. And sometimes you don't want to put your hand up in front of the group. So no one's, directly telling these females you can't speak or you can't contribute. But that's where that silently silenced comes in. It's some of the other aspects that are getting and influencing female coach learners into that kind of general feeling. Don't know if this one's going to work. Yeah, is that coming up one at a time for you guys? So on this slide, I just wanted to talk about some of the other key findings across, the other three elements really. And for me, I find them, really alarming. So firstly, we've got this idea, the females had undertaken different UEFA A licence courses, part 1 and 2 respectively. And only 1 out of the 9 female participants had a experience of another female on the course. So it's important to acknowledge that no coach educators or guest speakers were being invited onto part 1 or 2 that these females were on, and no 2 were on the same course. Across the course itself, there was no female content, tasks, video, stats. The examples that were given were, watch this Premier League match, or watch this Europa League match, or, you've been given Newcastle, and no kind of tasks that related to female football. Some of the females were told to coach like a man. So that's, authoritative behaviour. That's also linked to the other part of what our title's about. You're told to coach in an expectation and manner which aligns itself to the male professional game, which we might argue, is a long diagonal ball from the fullback to the wide forward to get in behind. When, in reality, some of these females are going, well, I probably wouldn't do a long diagonal ball with my RTC under 16s because they haven't got the power and, the leg muscles to do that. So I would want to do here and here, or whatever that might look like. But when you're trying to pass this award, that kind of contextualized experience, wasn't appreciated by the coach educators. We've also got instances where male players and teams and boys are brought in. So some females were finding themselves trying to pass this award for the first time whilst coaching in-house sessions where they're, coaching male players. A lot of the females, or most of these females, had to self-fund, and even when they disclosed that to males on the course, a lot of the male participants had club funding. One female said to me and articulated, I had to prioritise this course before owning my own house. We're talking about a course here that costs between £4,000 and £6,000, dependent upon when you enrolled on it. Moreover, tutors are legitimising this practice that I'm kind of talking about today. And what that means is, coach educators knew very little about the women's game or the girls' game. They were often joining in boys' club banter or using male pronouns, so lads, chaps. And furthermore, seeking best practice examples from male professional players on the course who didn't even pass the course. Lastly, many of these learners experience forms of symbolic violence, harassment. We had the quote earlier from Liv where male participants were knocking on her door late at night. So again, it's making these females feel very uncomfortable. Now, if we are to look at each one of these points, in isolation, you guys might go, well, it's not that much of a big deal. Just get on with it. So what, you got called a lad. But when we're looking at all of this collectively, it's like that idea of death by 1,000 cuts. It's consistent. It's subtle power relations that we in the environment cannot often see, feel, or pinpoint that are sometimes the hardest to dismantle.
Rebecca, we're just going to have to kind of speed it up and wrap it up if you can, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I've got just 2 more slides.
Okay, cheers.
Upon passing the UEFA licence, these females were, you're enrolled on it in a 2 to 3 year period. And when you pass, you get told here from Kim, well, you only pass because you're a female. So again, that's a really unsettling aspect for me personally. And I'll just finish then by letting you guys read through perhaps some of the recommendations for coach education moving forward, trying to think about gender inclusive pedagogy, culture, upskilling the female coach educators so we've got visible role models, appointing female safeguarding officers so females can feel safe to report the harassment that they are experiencing in this environment. Try and develop a more ethical and diverse educational experience, integrate female content, allocate funding, and then the last one, which perhaps completely, goes against some of the other findings really by Leanne and Nicole, is all 9 female coaches want this problem addressed in situ rather than being othered and isolated on female-only courses. Thank you very much for having me on and putting up with my technical difficulties at the start. And my details are there if anybody wants to interact with me about this topic.
That was brilliant, Rebecca. Thank you very much.